truth is, RMDs don't have to be something you dread every year. With the right strategy, they can become a tool to control your taxes, manage your income, and even strengthen your legacy plan. Hello and welcome back to Money and Meaning. My name is Matt Landon, and today I want to talk about RMDs. That's also known as required minimum distributions. Sometimes you hear them called MRDs. I don't know why they do that, but people just like to be different. Now, these are one of those topics that every retiree hears a ton about, but few really understand why the IRS is sending you a reminder. The truth is, RMDs don't have to be something you dread every year. With the right strategy, they can become a tool to control your taxes, manage your income, and even strengthen your legacy plan. So let's jump into what RMDs are and why they exist. Let's start with the basics here. RMDs are mandatory withdrawals that the IRS requires you to take from your tax-deferred retirement accounts. So things like traditional IRAs, 4Ks, you've kicked this money out down the road for a number of years, and all of a sudden the IRS is saying, we want our cut. It's like we want our take our piece of things. So when you jump back in time and think about it and say, why did this happen? When you take an RMD, well, what's happening is they said you don't have to pay taxes on this money now. But as it creeps along, they say, when you take it out, we're going to get our piece of the pie. And so what happens is you may have been retired for 15 years, but all of a sudden you're paying income again. And it's like, wait a minute, next year it goes up again. So here's a couple of the rules that you need to know. If you've been retired for a while, remember that the RMD age used to be 70 and a half. That changed under the Secure Act and then again under the Secure Act 2.0. So as of right now, if you were born between 1951 and 1959, you must take RMD starting at age 73. For those born in 1960 or later, the starting age is going to increase all the way to age 75, and that begins in 2033. Okay, so here's how it works. In the year you reach your RMD age, you have until April 1st of the following year to take your first distribution. Every RMD after that must be taken by December 31st. So here's the catch. If you delay and take that first RMD that following year, kind of in the spring, let's say you wait, take it in March or April, that means you have two RMDs that you're subject to that year. The other thing to keep in mind is the RMD is based on that December 31st value. So what happens is if you have not taken your RMD the end of this year, and you take two next year, your second RMD is actually going to be a higher amount. That second required minimum distribution is larger because it's including the value of the first one that you didn't take out right before December 31st. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. And it's not necessarily a pleasant surprise, but if you're in a situation where you're about to retire, your taxable income is really high this year, it's going to be significantly lower that next year. It might be a situation where it makes sense to do it that way. Now, here's the good news. The penalty for missing an RMD, which used to be an outrageous 50%, it has been reduced. It's still 25%. So if you have an RMD of $10,000 and you don't take it, for whatever reason, you get sick, you get distracted, you just didn't know any better and you miss it, you now owe the government $2,500. Now, here's the thing. If you correct it quickly, kind of within 2 years, it can drop to 10%. And I think that's because the IRS is finally realizing that honest mistakes do happen. It's not intentional. Things happen. Another important change applies to Roth case. Starting this year, they no longer have RMDs during your lifetime, which puts them on equal footing as Roth IRAs. That means if you've been holding off on rolling your Roth 4K into an IRA to avoid distributions, you no longer need to rush. Now, here's how RMDs are calculated. The math itself isn't complicated, but it's worth understanding. So the IRS uses life expectancy tables to determine how long your savings should last, and that drives the annual withdrawal amount. Every year, you take a balance of your account of December 31st from the previous year. You divide it by a factor on that table. The result is your RMD. Factors are a fun way of saying percentages. So if you have multiple IRAs, you can total up the RMDs, take the full amount from one, spread it across several. But if you have multiple 401ks or multiple work plans, 403bs, things of that nature, you must take a separate RMD from each plan. And if your spouse is more than 10 years younger and is your sole beneficiary, there's a special table you get to use that allows for a smaller RMD It's just a little tax advantage for couples planning ahead. But again, that's only if you're in the situation where you're more than 10 years apart in age. Now, here's where it gets interesting. When we talk about the strategy behind the rule, RMDs don't have to be something you simply react to every year. You can plan around them. For many families, the key is to control when income shows up on your tax return. Taking early withdrawals before RMD age, especially in low income tax years, can reduce the size of future RMDs, helping manage your tax brackets. We also talked about things like Roth conversions. That's an effective lever by doing Roth conversions earlier on. Again, you're reducing that IRA amount, reducing that required minimum distribution. If you're charitably inclined, you could do something called a QCD or a qualified charitable distribution. Lets you make a direct up to $100,000 per year directly from your IRA straight to a qualified charity. That counts towards your RMD, but it doesn't count towards your taxable income. It's one of the cleanest ways to give strategically and lower your tax bill at the same time. So if you're in a position where you're putting money in the plate every week at church and it's coming out of your checking account and you're having that RMD deposited into your checking account, you're paying income taxes on it. Then you turn around and make that contribution. Well, with the standard deduction being so high, many of us are doing the standard deduction instead of the itemized deduction, which means you're not really getting a tax break for that charitable giving. This doesn't mean don't give to the Lord, but it means you're not getting the full benefit. If you take it directly from the IRA doing that QCD, move it to the church, what happens is that doesn't show up as income at all, which is effectively a nice tax break. So here's why this matters for high net worth families. One of the things to keep in mind is that RMDs can have ripple effects beyond just taxes. Larger distributions trigger higher Medicare premiums through IRMA surcharges. They affect Social Security taxability. They can even impact estate planning outcomes if not managed carefully. I've seen families with seven-figure IRAs who never needed the income from the RMDs, but because they didn't plan ahead, the distributions caused unnecessary tax drag every year. The good news is that with foresight, these outcomes can be prevented. You can spread conversions, you can integrate charitable giving, or shift certain investments to be more tax efficient accounts and reduce that long term burden. So here at Semmax, we view RMDs as more than just a withdrawal rule. They're a coordination point between your income, your taxes, and your legacy. So when these pieces align, the results really compound in your favor. So let me just tell you this. RMDs are not optional. You got to take it. But how you handle them is. You could treat them like an annual chore, or you can use them as a part of a deliberate wealth strategy that helps preserve what you've built. So if you're approaching your early 70s, or if you're already taking your RMDs and want to make sure they're integrated with your broader tax plan and estate plan, that's exactly the type of conversation you should be having with your financial advisor. Thank you so much for joining me for Money and Meeting. Until next time, just remember, retirement isn't just about managing your money. It's about managing it with meaning. That intentionality is key. Thanks for listening. I hope you have a beautiful day.